YogaPlus. Download now for free.
Hi, my name is Kelsy Livic with Nayana Yoga, and today I'm going to be showing a labor and breathing sequence for labor. Why on earth would you want to cover yoga for labor? It's because it'll promote more movement during labor, which can help to shorten the amount of time you spend in labor. And also by incorporating the breath and using gravity to your advantage, you can shorten the amount of time that you spend in labor. Yoga can also help to stretch your muscles. It opens your body and it helps the baby move consistently through your birth canal. There's only 4 to 10% of babies who are what are called sunny side up, facing your belly, but that can make it really painful. So through movement, to eliminate your chances of that even more, you can make the baby face your spine, which will make it easier for you and for the baby. Also, being on your back is generally one of the worst things that you can do. You always find that in movies, but that's because oftentimes when it's a medicated birth, you have to be on your back. And sometimes circumstances or due to personal preference, you're gonna have a medicated birth, in which case you won't be able to sustain weight on your legs, and that's okay if you choose to go that route. But for natural labor, it can slow labor down, it makes it more painful, and then also it blocks the baby from descending. And the reason for that is your tailbone curves upward like a C, the letter C, and as the baby's coming down, it gets blocked by the tailbone. And so that's why when you hear of women experiencing a bruised tailbone or even a broken tailbone due to birth, it's because of that. We'll also be covering how your partner can help you during this yoga for labor sequence. And it's a really good idea to start practicing a few weeks ahead of time before you know that you're approaching your due date. That can help to make this information more ingrained in yourself and your partner, who can help you through some of that breathing, and he or she can also encourage you to keep moving when you normally might not want to, just because the contractions can start to get more and more powerful and you kind of feel stuck. So what I would recommend is to watch the video maybe during the early part of your labor when contractions feel like just a tightening and releasing rather than a really painful wrap around of the muscles in your belly that are actually, starting to push the baby down. So if you can do it early on, if you're watching the video early on, then you might be encouraged to keep moving throughout the rest of your labor. And at that point, you might want to take a printout with you to the hospital or your birth center, or even if you're having a home birth, and you have that in front of you with pictures and all the poses that you can do to help you move along. So now we're going to talk about breathing. Why is breathing important? There have been many, many studies on the effects of breathing with awareness and depth to decrease the amount of pain that you're feeling. So not only does it decrease pain, but it reduces your anxiety. It makes you feel more in control of your situation. And it also makes contractions more purposeful and productive. That in itself can help to shorten labors. So we're using both the yoga poses and your breathing to help you shorten the amount of time that you spend in labor and to make it less painful. So we're going to be covering the whole first stage of labor. And the first stage is just that point where you're getting ready to start pushing the baby out. So it goes from 0 centimeters of dilation to 10 centimeters. And that's the stage where you're going to start pushing. That first stage encompasses 3 phases. There's the early phase, when contractions are happening consistently, but through irregular intervals. So you're feeling a tightening and then a releasing. And you should be able to talk and walk through that phase. That's the longest part of labor, but it's not painful. It's up to 2/3 of the amount of time that you spend in labor. That could be several hours to several days. And then once you've finished with that early phase, you move into the active phase, and that's when contractions become more powerful. and you'll feel the contractions for at least a minute. You have maybe a 3 to 5 minute break, and then you feel the contraction again, and they start to get even more intense as you move further along. That's anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. And then finally, this is the toughest part, but it's the shortest part. You're gonna reach the transitional phase. The transitional phase is when you move from 7 centimeters of dilation to 10 centimeters of dilation. And then you feel shaky, nauseous, irritable. Sometimes you feel like you need to use the restroom because the baby's actually pressing on your bowels at that point. But it's the shortest phase. It's anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes. They say up to 2 hours, but that's not very typical. So right now we're gonna cover the early phase of labor. So there are 2 different breathing techniques for the early phase. You can use Ujjayi, what we know normally as ocean breath, or to de-stress as contractions do start to become a little more powerful as you move into that second phase or the active phase. You can use Brahmari breath for a break. So we're gonna start with Ujjayi. I'm gonna breathe in and out through my mouth initially, and then I'm gonna show you through the nose. So it works like this. You're constricting the back of the throat just slightly, and you're making the breath noisy. So you want to fully inhale and fully exhale at the same ratio. And now try to do the same thing, but with your mouth closed and you're breathing in and out through your nose. And you use this breath the entire time. So the entire time you're doing each pose, and also in between your contractions as you're moving from one pose to the other. And then if you're doing the Brahmari breath, which is the queen bee breath or humming breath, then we're only doing one part of that, which is to inhale. And then you're humming on the way back out. So just use what feels right for you, and then you can always go back to the Ujjayi breath. So from there, we're gonna go over the asanas that you'll be doing when you're in the early phase of labor. So we're gonna start by coming into child's pose. When you're really pregnant, I'm 9 months pregnant now, so I need a lot of room for my belly. You're gonna take a bolster or a pillow or a birthing ball, whatever you have available to you. You can rest your chest on that or your arms with your knees kept wide in order to make room for the baby. And you stay here for at least a couple breaths. And then when you're ready, you can move that bolster or pillow out of the way, and we're gonna come into cat-cow. So your knees are right underneath your hips, your wrists are right underneath the shoulders. You're gonna inhale, look up, and exhale around the spine. Inhale, look up, and exhale around the spine. From here, we're moving into a squat or a malasana, garland pose. So you're walking the hands back to the knees, you bring the knees back in, and then keep your feet wide enough that they can be flat on the mat. If you have trouble keeping your feet flat on your mat or the ground, then you can always sit on a birthing ball or on a bolster or pillow. Otherwise, you're gonna stay in your squat, and you can even alternate pressing your elbows into the insides of your knees one at a time. Remember the Ujjayi breath. And then from here, we're placing the hands down on the ground. We're gonna maybe lift up a little bit, and then we're gonna come into Uttanasana, our forward fold. So you wanna make sure that your knees are wide enough for your belly. You can grab your elbows and gently hang. Sway from side to side. If your weight's in your heels, start to press the weight into the balls of your feet, lifting the tailbone up toward the ceiling. And come up halfway so the blood can come back down to your feet. Then bend the knees and then roll up one vertebrae at a time until you're all the way to standing. So if you're experiencing a little bit of nausea, sometimes we definitely feel that when we're experiencing morning sickness in the beginning part of the pregnancy, but also in the third trimester, you start to feel a little sick too because the baby is bigger and is pressing up on your stomach. Make sure you take everything really slowly. We're coming up really slowly. We're staying halfway for a little bit to make sure that the blood's rushing back down to our feet, and then we're rolling up really slowly. So now we're in mountain pose. So you can stay here for a couple of breaths, and you're softening your knees. You're feeling grounded into your mat or the floor. You're keeping your shoulders away from your ears. You're relaxing. You can take a couple of breaths here. And then from here, we're going to do some hip circles. So with the hip circles, you want to make sure that the top part of your hands is at the base of your back, and then your fingertips are on the buttocks for support. And then your feet can be either hip width or slightly wider. And then you're pressing the hips forward, and then you're starting to take them out to the sides and then towards the back. We're going to do 3 of these. And then we're going to go the other direction. Try to keep your torso in one place while your hips are the only things moving here. Then when you come back to center, we're going to do supported side bends. So you're going to take your right hand, since I'm mirroring you, place it on your hip. Inhale with the left hand, and then exhale as you take your hip out to the side and you reach for the other side of the room. And then inhale back to center, and then exhale, reach. And then inhale back to center, exhale, reach. We're going to do one more. Inhale to center, and exhale, reach. And then from here, we're going to go into warrior. So you're going to step out 3.5 to 4 feet apart. You're going to turn your right foot in slightly. Your left foot's going to turn all the way out. You want your hips to be squared to the front. They're tilted. Make sure that they're straight ahead. And then as you bend your left leg, you want to make sure that your legs are wide enough so that you have your knee bent at a 90-degree angle. Keeping your shoulders down. You're going to open your arms, stretch your fingertips in opposite directions. This helps to strengthen the quadricep. Remember the Ujjayi breath. Then we're going to inhale as we straighten both legs. We're going to come into goddess pose. So it's going to be heels in, toes are out. We're going to inhale to 5-pointed star, and then exhale into goddess pose. Then inhale back up. And make sure that your feet are now pointed straight ahead. Inhale, lift your arms, reach up, and then exhale as you come forward into your wide-legged forward fold. If you need to, you can heel toe out a little bit. If you need some more height here, it's okay to have some blocks in front of you, or you can place your palms flat on your mat. Couple breaths. And then when you're ready, you can heel toe in a little bit, bend your knees, and then roll up really slowly to come into warrior on the other side. So now you're turning the left toes in, right toes are out. Widen your stance, and then come down into warrior 2 when you're ready. Couple breaths here. And inhale to come back up. You're going to square your toes. We'll walk it in. Heel toe in. So from here, we're taking the feet out just a little bit, so slightly wider than hip width apart. You can bring your hands to your heart, and then we're going to kneel all the way down until we get into a squat. So you want to keep your heels on the floor if you can. Otherwise, maybe get some height. Sit on a bolster or a block or a pillow. And again, we're shifting so that we have the elbows pressed into either knee, one at a time. As we move further along in our labor, then this is a great pose to get some support from your birth partner. Let's go ahead and place the hands behind us. You can sit all the way down. Then we're gonna take that left leg and have it bent underneath you. You're gonna take the right leg up. You're pressing the foot into the inner portion of your arm, and then you can wrap your hands around that leg, interlacing the fingers. If it's hard for you to wrap your arms all the way around the leg, it's okay to use a strap to do the same thing. You wanna keep the foot flexed and then press into the chest, and then you rock it back and forth, and that loosens the muscles and the fascia on the outside of your hips to prep you for cow face pose. So we'll just do this for a few more seconds. And then when you're ready, you can start to drape that leg over your lap to make sure that your knees are stacked one on top of the other. If you find that you're popping your hip up from the ground when you come into this pose, then it's a good idea to get some height. So I'm gonna take a bolster. You can use a pillow or a block, and you place that right underneath you. And you put that underneath both hips just to get some more height. So we're gonna stay here for a couple of breaths. Remember your Ujjayi breath. And then when you're ready, you can take that bolster or pillow out from underneath you, and then we're wrapping that top leg all the way behind you for pigeon pose. If you find that your hip is popping up in this pose, then you can use your pillow or bolster to tuck underneath the hip that is on the same side as that bent knee that's in front of you. For me, it's more comfortable to do without, so I'm just gonna be flat on the mat. And then if you have some blocks, you can rest your forearms on those blocks, or if you can make enough space by moving your foot in front of you, then you can rest on your forearms on the ground. This is a good place to start rocking from side to side to help open up the hips. Remember to breathe, Ujjayi breath. You want to try to hold each pose for a minimum of at least 2 breaths. And then when you're ready, you can come up to your hands, walk the hands back to your hips, tuck your foot in, and then you're resting your weight on that front leg and wrapping the other leg that's behind you back around to the front. So now we're gonna move to the other side. So you're tucking the right foot in, you're gonna hold the left foot up. You're bringing the foot up, flexing the foot, and then pressing it into your chest before you rock. And then when you're ready, you can start to drape that leg over your lap, keeping the knees aligned for cow face pose. Remember, this is a good spot to put a bolster, a pillow, or a block underneath you if you need some more height, if your hips are popping up on either side. And then when you're ready, you can take that top leg and start to bring it around behind you for pigeon pose. And you can use your pillow to place underneath your hip. We're different from side to side. So maybe on this side you'll need it, whereas on the other side you didn't, or vice versa. And then you can come forward, taking your foot forward, and then resting on your forearms. You can rock from side to side. And we'll start to come up. And then you can wrap that back leg all the way back around to the front. And now we're gonna go into our crescent lunge. Okay, when you're ready to come into the crescent lunge, we're gonna start in a tabletop position, and then you can take your foot forward in between your hands, And then you're extending the leg that's behind you back a little bit more so that you can keep a 90-degree angle between your thigh and your shin on that front leg. And you're sinking your hips down. So you're stretching your hip flexors, you're making more room in your pelvis. And then once you're here, you have the option of lifting up and exhale as you move back. Inhale, come back up. And then exhale, bring your hands back down to the ground. If you have a partner to help you, this will become more crucial as we move further along in the labor, but the partner can help you to create space in your hips. So they'll take the inner thigh, roll it upward and then back, and then do the same thing with your rib cage. So you're moving it up and then back. So you're moving the hands away from each other, creating more space and allowing you to go deeper into the stretch. Once you've stayed here for a couple of breaths, we're gonna switch sides. So you're gonna take that front leg back, and then you're moving the back leg forward. Remember to extend the back leg out, and then inhale up, and exhale back. Inhale back up, exhale, bring your hands down to your mat. And then we're taking that front leg back, and now we're gonna cross the ankles. We'll sit all the way back, and we're gonna come into butterfly pose. Okay, when you're ready to come into butterfly pose, you're bringing the outer edges of the feet together, and then we're gonna roll the thigh inward on each side, on each leg. You can do that twice on each leg, and that helps you to move forward. So we're gonna inhale, stretch up, and then exhale, come forward. You can always use a birth ball. You can use your partner to extend forward or place your hands directly on the ground. And if it feels better for you to be upright, then that's okay too. Then you would just stay upright and then maybe flutter the knees. You can also rock back and forth to help loosen up your hips. And once you've stayed here for a couple of breaths, we're gonna go into our final pose for this sequence, which is the frog pose. For the frog pose, it can be an intense stretch for various reasons, but it is hard on your knees. So you wanna make sure that you have a couple of pillows or bolsters nearby, or at least some padding. You place your knees on the bolsters, and then you start to walk yourself forward so that you can rest on your forearms. And you'll know if it's getting too far forward because you'll feel a lot of stretching in your ligaments there in the pelvis. So you're coming forward. If it feels too intense, you can always ease back towards your feet. Otherwise, extend forward. And then once you're in a comfortable position here, you can start to take the feet out beyond the knees. And you can always move forward and back here. Once you've stayed for a couple of breaths, you can start to take the feet in, and then you shift your hips back, come back onto your hands, and then bring your knees together. And then at this point, you can just redo the entire sequence. You do it as much as you like and as often as you like before you start to move into that active stage of labor. So that concludes the yoga sequence for the early phase of labor. And that encompasses, the early phase of labor encompasses the time that you go from 0 centimeters of dilation to 3 centimeters of dilation. And like I said earlier on in the video, you're just gonna feel some tightening and then releasing, but it's not gonna be painful. And it could last anywhere from several hours to several days. And if you can, you are gonna wanna sleep through some of it, but when you're also able to, it's good to go through this yoga sequence. You'll know how far dilated you are based on how you feel. And then also, if you're going into a hospital, sometimes you go into early, especially for first-time moms, because you just feel the contractions and you're worried. You don't want to have the baby at home or in the car if that's not what you had planned. So you show up, and then they'll check for you, and they'll tell you that you're, maybe only 1 centimeter dilated, and maybe send you back home for a few more hours, and then tell you when contractions get more intense to come back to the hospital. And then you know that you're reaching the active phase of labor when your contractions become closer together. So it'll be either anywhere from 3 minutes to 5 minutes apart. They'll last for an entire minute and be that way for at least an hour. And that's when you go from 3 centimeters to 7 centimeters of dilation. This is my third pregnancy, so I just want to give you as much information as I can give you, especially if you're a first-time mom. Another question that I was given recently is, when does your water break during this process? Sometimes it doesn't at all, and you have a baby that is born in the amniotic sac, and that sometimes is called a baby in caul, or they call it a mermaid baby. It's supposed to be a sign of good luck. But if you are having a hard time progressing through your labor, sometimes your midwife or your doctor will offer you the option of rupturing the membrane. And in that case, they'll take what looks like a crochet hook and they'll rip it open for you. And so all the water comes gushing out. And then it makes your contractions more powerful and it shortens the amount of time that you spend in labor. If your water breaks ahead of time, if you don't have to get it ruptured by the doctor or the midwife and it ruptures, take note of what color it looks like. Just take note of its appearance, because you'll want to call your doctor or midwife right away and report that to them. And then they'll give you advice as to whether or not you should rest a little bit until contractions become more powerful before you then go to your birth center or you go to the hospital. But typically they'll say once your water has broken, and you always replenish the fluid, so it's not like your baby is going to be without the water. The baby's going to be fine. It's still breathing through your the placenta and the umbilical cord. But what they worry about is the risk of infection, especially if you have something like Group B streptococcus. So typically they'll say that the baby, once your water has broken, needs to be born within 24 hours. In which case, if you don't start feeling regular contractions on your own, then they might introduce something like Pitocin, which mimics your natural hormone called oxytocin and will stimulate those contractions. If you'd like to help yourself move further along in your labor, if you want those contractions to start to become more powerful, say it's happening really slowly, then what you can do is, there's a number of various things that you can do. So you could use clary sage oil as aromatherapy. You can also take that oil and have someone rub it onto your ankles, and you do a really powerful ankle rub. It's hard to explain, but you're really rubbing pretty hard on the ankles, and that will help to trigger labor. And same thing with the bottoms of the feet. So you're rubbing the bottoms of the feet really hard, you're rubbing the ankles really hard. That's why sometimes when you go to a reflexology or a foot spa to get a foot massage when you're pregnant, they'll avoid those areas unless you specifically ask them to help you if you're overdue, for example. And then also nipple stimulation. So if you're planning on breastfeeding and you have a breast pump, you can use the breast pump. So those are just a few ways of helping to get your own labor moving along. So this concludes the early phase of labor yoga sequence and breathing. And if you're interested in learning more about how maybe a partner can help you, and also what poses you can resort to when your labor progresses, when you get into the active phase and the transitional phase, then watch the other videos that we have. So that'll be for the active phase and transitional phase, like I said. And then I also include breathing methods for both those stages and the pushing stage. So I hope to see you in further videos. And I wish you a very healthy, happy pregnancy and birth. Thank you very much for watching. I am 8 months pregnant with our third daughter, so I can attest to the fact that hip pain, low back pain, and tightness in those areas is one of the most common ailments you'll experience as a pregnant woman. Stretching these areas relieves not only the pain, but also preps you for labor and delivery. I'll see you again in another video. Thank you. Namaste.
Introducing YogaPlus, offering a free series every month with over 300 different videos. Take control of your health. Work out anytime, anywhere. YogaPlus. Download now for free.